To begin the Decade Chain Tool service, first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just remove the pin driving handle from the main body of the tool, set it aside. And then I'm going to work on disassembling the handle from the main body and also removing the mid plate. To do that, I'm going to remove the 6mm grub screw that's at the base of the handle. Got the base of the handle pointing up, as there are a few spare parts contained inside the handle. And those are the Campagnolo chain pin peening screw and a spare chain pin for the tool. With those all removed, it's going to allow me to use a 5mm hex key, accessing the recessed fastener down in the base of the handle, and go ahead and get that loosened up and removed. I'm going to leave that fastener in the main handle of the tool for the time being. And that's going to allow me to focus on removing the mid plate from the main body of the tool. I'll lift that out of the way and set those items aside. Come back to the inspection and clean up on them in just a second. Now, returning to the pin driving handle, the first thing that we've got to be aware of when we're using this tool is how many of these peening rings get built up on the tool. And at a certain point, if you're just not cleaning them off, your tool's actually not going to push the pin all the way out. So periodic maintenance, removal, and cleaning of this is a great idea. Now, if you have a bunch of peening rings that are still on the pin itself, when you go to remove the knurled nut and the pin are going to come off together as one piece, because those peening rings are not allowing the knurled nut to pass over the end of the pin. So, to remove the knurled nut, first try and do it by hand. There's a small drop of Loctite that's applied at the factory. Okay, I'm able to get that broken free by hand. If you can't, use some knurled slip joint pliers, apply light clamping force, get that broken free. Now, this tool doesn't have any rings on it, so it's going to allow me to go ahead and remove the knurled nut. At this point, I've got the pin pointing up a little bit. I'll remove my pin. And the last piece of disassembly is removing the 5/32 ball bearing from the handle. Now, this pin and knurled nut came off together from a separate tool. Hopefully you can see the peening rings that are still on there. If you're having a hard time removing the peening rings with a pair of pliers or something like that, what you can do is try and support the open end of the knurled nut on a bench vise with the jaws open just enough that you're able to lightly drive the pin down and out of the knurled nut. That'll get both of the pieces separated, and it'll also remove those rings that are still stuck on your tool. So, what I'm going to do now is just go through the cleaning for this setup, and just recommended to use isopropyl alcohol and some clean shop rags to do that. I want to focus on the threaded surfaces first. I've got the threads on the handle. I'm going to get those cleaned up really nicely. The tolerance between the threads in the handle and the threads in the main body is really tight. So we want to do everything we can to remove any debris that may exist in there. The threads in the main body, you can get in there with a cotton swab and clean that up. If you have access to compressed air, you can also use compressed air to get in there and clean that up a little bit. Set that one aside. I want to also clean the base of the mid plate. Get any debris or garbage wiped off of that. And then also clean my pin and set that rag aside. And this gives me a chance to really focus on what's the condition of the pin. And what we're looking for is any deformation at the point of the pin. If you're feeling it by hand, maybe time to consider installation of your spare pin in there. So this one feels good. Happy to put that back together and use it again. And that's kind of the run through on disassembly, cleaning, and inspection. And that brings us right to reassembly of the tool. So first thing I'll do is focus on the pin driving handle. I'm going to take my 5/32 ball bearing, drop that down into the handle, followed by the pin. The interface between the ball bearing and the pin is dry, no lubrication there. Apply a small drop of 242 Loctite to the coarser threads to interact with the knurled nut. I'm going to leave it dry here just to keep moving along. Once I've installed that knurled nut, just want to tighten it finger tight onto the pin handle, and then make sure that the pin rotates freely without any binding. If there is a little bit of binding, you can begin by backing off the knurled nut a little bit, counterclockwise, or loosening it, and just quickly check again for that play. We want that to rotate freely and easily with no binding. That feels great. That handle's ready to go. And that brings me to the main body, the mid plate, and the main handle. So what I'm going to look at doing is using my 5mm hex key and putting it into the recess in the main handle, engaging the head of that 5mm, put a little bit of grease in the threads there. And with my free hand, I'm going to take the mid plate, drop it into the main body on the chain tool, sitting down there nicely and cleanly. I'm going to grab that, anchoring the mid plate in hand with my free hand. Slide that fastener into the main body, and that's going to be snug and not tight. Once I've snugged that up, I want to inspect that the mid plate sitting nice and flush on there. The handle is interacting with the main body really well. Now, to complete the handle installation, I'm going to take my Campagnolo peening screw, drop it back into the handle. If you didn't use your spare pin, go ahead and drop your spare pin back into the handle. And the last piece is going to be the grub screw. I'll set that grub screw back in, using my 6mm hex key. That just needs to be in there and snugged, not tight. So the main body's ready to go, and the last piece before it goes back into service is going to be applying some grease along the length of the threads on the pin driving handle. And that engaged nicely on those threads in the main body, and those interface between those feels terrific. Nice fresh layer of grease. Got everything cleaned up real well. And just take this last chance to wipe away some of the excess grease. And there's a decade chain tool that's ready to go back in service.